I was not the smartest in the class. Luckily enough, I was able to go abroad to go to school. I was on the flight and I was sitting between two people and we were on the runway. And one thing I was telling myself at that point, I still remember that really, really crystal clear. I'm only going abroad because of the privilege. It's not the merit. It's not that I was the smartest person who deserved to go. I tried to constantly remind myself where I came from. For you to be practicing your religion, you have to be the priest. What would you say?
Fucking hell, excuse my French. Yeah. Adding in the practical element to it. What made you actually decide on that, or how did that happen?
Our parents did the hardest job, made from 0 to 100, whatever they could. Now, we are a failure if we can't make 100 to 100,000.
What I believe, what you're supporting is the human capital element, that how companies can actually effectively, using the technology the right way, can have the access to fulfilling their needs, right? So
what I'm doing is basically trying to solve, or what we are essentially trying to do is just trying to solve the problem of unemployment. We are just the fools who are trying to try to solve this problem.
you just need to somehow understand that you work for the people because you are selling your dream to them.
Exactly. And that is your job as an entrepreneur.
That is your job, to just get them to see the same North Star. And if you have to somehow drag some... Thank you so much for joining us today, Usama. And you are working on an amazing project with the name of Qureos, and you are a co-founder. And what I believe, what you're supporting is the human capital element, that how companies can actually effectively, using the technology the right way, can have the access to fulfilling their needs, right? So, like I said, thank you so much for joining us. And I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we just dig deeper, because before we even started, we just got really pumped up about the topic we were discussing, which we both are passionate about. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the details with that, So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. A little about myself. I'm born and raised in Pakistan, but I mean, for a living, what I'm doing is basically trying to solve, or what we are essentially trying to do is just trying to solve the problem of unemployment. We are just the fools who are trying to solve this problem, and I mean, this problem can be solved in multiple ways, and a lot of great companies out there are trying to do the same, even the institutions. And our thought is that if we can make the process a little more efficient, make it more people based rather than to the manual tasks that the recruitment industry has to go through, and we are able to just bring them together with the prowess of technology that there is out there, that is available at our disposal now. We can just make the process a lot more simpler, and as a byproduct of that, decrease the time to hire for companies, and to make sure that they're hiring the right people. So it's more of an AI talent scout that we are building, and we are essentially just hoping that by doing this, we are creating a dent in terms of unemployment decrease, which hopefully will make sure that the process is a lot more seamless for the candidates, and make sure that the employers are finding what they're looking for.
That's amazing. So, I have a couple of questions. I would love for you to just take us through your early life. You said that you were born and brought up in Pakistan, and then where your education led to, and if you have been abroad. And along with that, how did you come up with that idea, the problem that you're working on? And how was the team formed? Yeah, so the first about your personal life to the journey, and then how did you get to that journey? That'd be great.
Yeah, somewhat a long question. I'll try to keep it as short as possible.
We have time.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Pakistan, and spent a lot of my time, obviously, like other kids in the school as well, but somewhat privileged to be able to go to one of the better schools, in high schools in Pakistan, in Karachi at least. And I realized with the privilege, and that privilege also allowed me to go abroad and study. I was not the smartest in the class. I was an average student, I guess. There were a lot smarter students around me as well, but yeah, luckily enough, I was able to go abroad to go to school. And at that point, when I still remember the time when I was on my way out. I was on the flight and I was sitting between two people, and we were on the runway. And one thing I was telling myself at that point, I still remember that really, really crystal clear, that I'm only going abroad because of the privilege. It's not the merit. It's not that I was the smartest person who deserved to go. It's just that there was a privilege, and I was luckily born in a family that could afford to send me abroad. That's all. And
Wow.
when I did go there, I tried to constantly remind myself where I came from, and there was some sort of a guilt that was building within me, which was, why me, and why not others who deserved a lot more, and it's just an unfair world out there, right? um, but at that point I was like, what can I do to change this? And there's only very few things that we can do, and my limited knowledge or my limited understanding at that point told me that fine, I've gone out with the privilege, but I still have an option to go back at some point and bring that privilege back to as many people as I can.
Beautiful. So
Even
where were
that's
you traveling to at that time?
At that point I was going to Canada
Uh-huh.
to go to school. Luckily, got into one of the more competitive programs, and gone through the journey. It was not the most easiest one. At some points I thought of dropping out.
Uh-huh.
It was getting super hard. It was basically 2 degrees at the same time with a lot of limitations. It was a class of 250 students that started the program, ended 5 years later. This ended with I think 46 students graduating from
Wow.
that class.
And
And
what were those 2 degrees about? What was the
it
program?
was it was BMath and BBA,
Uh-huh.
from two different universities, University of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier University, across the road from each other, and with a co-op program. So you have to work along with your school. So basically, it's 8 months of school, 4 months of work, and you repeat every year, with the longest break, which is 20 days at max between two semesters at sometimes. So
Wow.
that was the first time during this journey I realized, hey, this is hard. I don't know why people say that school is easy, but at least my journey was tough.
It is tough and it's constant on the go,
It was
right? When you
constant.
talk about
Yeah.
20 days is nothing to rejuvenate and
Yeah.
if you are adding in the practical element to it, what made you actually decide on that or how did that happen?
I mean, it just sounded fancy, and I took it. I had no idea what I was getting into until I actually did. And first semester in, it was my first call to my elder brother, and I was like, "Hey, I don't think I can do it." He's like, "What's the worst that can happen?" I was like, "Man, I'm gonna fail, and they're gonna throw me out of the program." He's like, "What's the other option that you have?" I was like, "I can continue doing what I'm doing. If I pass, I pass. If I fail, then they will push me out, right? Or the other thing is, I just
Quit.
quit myself." He's like, "What happens when you quit yourself?" I was like, "I'm gonna go into some other program and I'm gonna complete my education." He's like, "What happens about this semester?" I'm like, "I'll have to restart." He's like, "You can't do anything right now. Might as well just go for it and see what happens towards the end of it. There's no point quitting right now." I was like, "Fair." I pushed, and from that day onwards, I don't know how, but I did make it through. But I think that was one of the most critical advices I've ever gotten. That don't quit. And this is something at that point that those words were said by my elder brother. Today I tell this to myself, because that was one day that I realized that if I had quit, I wouldn't have gone through, and if I didn't go through, I wouldn't have learned what I learned.
You know, that's so beautiful, right? In that piece of advice which you look at, he was basically acting as a mentor, as a coach, and he wasn't telling you the answer, but he was forcing you to do the critical thinking.
Right.
He was actually educating you by asking questions. And I'm sorry to hijack your story, right? But
No
I think
worries.
this point is very important because you see, when we think about us as individuals, and it's a phenomena which I have noticed across the globe, and of course with the emerged markets or the well functioning societies per se from the worldly scope, they do have a lot of trajectory towards the positivity. But when it comes to children, for example, or schooling system or education, the tendency to ask questions has been snatched away from them by the time they get to, like, I don't know, later elementary or primary, or, like beginning of secondary school. And then when you see the adults even, walking around today, they just feel that asking question is not the right thing. And what your brother enabled, directly, or enabled you while in that particular moment, is that he actually practiced it and he deployed it. So I would love to learn about your upbringing and how was it when you were growing up, and your brother a little bit, or your family dynamics, whatever you're comfortable
Yeah,
in
yeah,
sharing with
for
us.
sure. We come from a my dad had a very humble beginning, very humble beginning. So he's a self-made entrepreneur. Whatever he has basically created the privilege for us as children. He basically started himself with nothing. So we're super proud of him for doing that, along with my mom as well. We are three brothers. Luckily, one elder brother and one younger brother. To me, so I'm the middle child. But luckily, it has its own perks, right? You have a mentor, and you have someone to practice your mentorship with. So it works both ways, and it sort of helps. And I mean, it's simple, right? I mean, like any other household, and my household was the same. We try to listen to our parents at whatever we can, but at the same time, my elder brother obviously played a very important role in terms of creating making me who I am by sharing all of his experiences. He also went to school in Canada, so I knew a lot of what he could teach me as well, and I just tried to pass it on to my younger brother. So how it is, the first one makes the most mistakes, learns, passes on to the second one makes slightly lesser, and third one enjoys the most. So I guess, and I hope that's how it worked, but I feel myself to be very lucky in that perspective.
And I think the credit resides with the learner, I believe, right? Because the advice can be given, but if you are an individual, as someone who is not like a sponge or looking to actually take that advice that's been given, it's very important. But luckily, you had that mind frame, or you had that environment you grew up in. So my question
Absolutely.
is that you mentioned your father had humble beginnings, right? So did you see the phase of him actually going?
Absolutely. I was super young at that point.
Yeah.
So I do remember some of the glimpses. Obviously, don't know the exact
Ins and outs.
ins and outs, but I do know the stories. Uh, so there's huge respect in terms of how he built. And when you see someone who had nothing build something out of his life, with very little or no education, right? He focused a lot more on us to get the education that we did, but he himself had very little education.
Powerful.
So when he could do it, it's a motivator altogether that we can potentially do it as well. And this is what I tell my friends as well, that and my other friends as well. It's not only my dad who made something. I mean, other people did as well. And when I meet my friends who have similar backgrounds as well, we tell ourselves our parents did the hardest job, made it from 0 to 100, whatever they could. Now we are a failure if we can't make 100 to 100,000. Then I mean, we are starting much better off. So we have to sort of pull our weight. But
Yes.
luckily, if we don't do that bad, we can still stay on 100, and that's not a bad life altogether.
There's nothing to lose. That's amazing. So you were saying that three of you, and then you just went to study abroad in
Yeah.
Canada, and after finishing studies, then what happened?
So it was during the studies that I started my work experiences as well, right? So there's a co-op program for
Yes,
four
you were
months
saying.
a year. So when I was working, my first work experience was at a nursing home in an accounting department. It was a nursing home company. It was a group rather, with multiple nursing homes, and I was working out of the head office in their accounting department. And
So
the
when you say
reason
nursing home is elderly care,
elderly care, yeah.
yeah, okay, very good.
And when I why I chose accounting? Simple. People around me told me that, hey, you're good with numbers. Just do accounting, do CA, ACCA, CPA, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Just do that, and you'll have a good life. And I was naive at that point. I was like, sure, I'll just do that. I mean, it wasn't too bad doing in school. But when I did my first work experience in accounting, I realized this is something I cannot do. This was not rewarding enough. I was not happy doing what I was doing. And the simple answer was I looked at my manager and I looked at my manager and I looked 5 years ahead of me. This is the chair I'm going to be in. This is going to be my daily life. And I looked at myself and I was like, no, that is not the life that I want for myself. So yeah, I came back to school and then I realized, along with other students who came from the same experience and they were not happy, the third option. Now we were deeper into school, right? So it's very hard to now move careers completely. So constantly need to see where are we and how can we sort of maneuver around from here on rather than taking drastic steps. And that is where essentially all of us started getting into or trying to get into private equity and hedge fund finance space. And those, I was lucky enough to find those opportunities as my next two opportunities as well. And and while doing those, they were very, very fulfilling. I was very happy in terms of getting into this space because now I was not only looking at the financial side of things, but also the operational side of things, because you need to look at those when you're investing into a business. But when I did that, there was something that was still not making me happy. I wasn't content, and I was like, at some points I spoke to the people around me as well, and they were like, hey, this space is amazing. People are trying to get into this space. Why don't you want to stay in this space? And and I remember some nights when I told myself that I'm just thinking too much. I mean, this is what life is. Let's just continue doing what it is and just be happy with it. So tried to come to terms with it, and but it was still something was missing, and I couldn't tell what. I couldn't spot it. So kept doing it, and then at work I realized, speaking to some of the founders, speaking to some of the companies, or at least hearing about the companies that we were working on, realized, hey, these guys are doing some of the more exciting work out there. Now, disclaimer: grass is always greener on the other side. Just it looked a lot more fun, but when you come on the other side, you go like, maybe that side was also better. But anyway, at that point, I was like, hey, these guys are doing a lot more fun work. Why not get into the business now that I understand this thing? At that point, I also told myself, this is the time I'm going to be able to make as many mistakes as I want to. So even if I decided to go to the other side of the table and make and if that was supposed to be a mistake, I can still come back. I'm still young, so I can do whatever I want to. So I was like, hey, let's make the switch now. And that is when I worked at a very, very early stage fintech in Canada only, on an AI bond pricing tool, which was at a time when AI was not ChatGPT only. So it was a lot more interesting and exciting. I had no idea what tech is. So it was a team of 11 people with only two of us, the CEO and myself, being the non-technical guys. The product and the rest of the 9 guys were product engineering. So we did everything from the most mundane and boring task of posting on LinkedIn about the company, and creating those posts, to all the way the more exciting part of actually getting the deals through and speaking to the investors and companies and stuff. So that was a lot more exciting. But I was happy, but there was again a realization of something's missing, and I don't want to sound like someone who is never content, and I'm really happy with where I've gotten and what life has essentially shaped up to it, but I constantly wanted a little more from life. Hey, I've gotten this, maybe can I get a little more, can I ask for more? So that is what I did, and at that point I analyzed my life and I was like, hey, what's missing here? And the only thing that was missing was that first point that I talked about in my journey, which was the guilt. What I'm now doing is, with all the education that I've gotten, all the experience that I have, I'm actually serving for the market that I'm in, which is Canada, but also my customers are the banks, who are just going to add an additional zero to their balance sheets or their P&Ls, and that's all they're going to do. I'm not really creating an impact. I'm not really creating an impact for the region where I'm from. And that is something that made me look like, I'm missing something here,
Hmm.
and this is what I'm missing. So that is when I decided to move back. But moving back had could not be directly come back to Pakistan, because there are two major shocks that you go through:
Hmm.
cultural and financial.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know if I was ready to take both
Hmm.
together,
Hmm.
because people around me who had taken those steps in a few years prior to that, I, I had seen them come back really, really quickly after a couple of months.
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. So I was like, okay, Middle East is a softer landing,
Hmm.
more of a cultural shock and less of a financial shock.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to take that, come back to the region, understand the region, fell in love with the region, understood their problems, and then decided to come back to Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
at least for the interim, right now where I am.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how did I do that? Reached out to my friends who had graduated, also people around me, my high school alumni, people around me, and found this really, really good opportunity at a mass transportation tech company growing super, super fast at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I joined them to lead their expansion into some of the countries. And that is when I essentially came back, joined in Dubai, but soon after spent some time in Egypt, Jordan, UAE, and Saudi, before spending an entire year in Saudi and realizing, hey, I want to call quits on this, and I feel like I'm ready to go back, and essentially uh, build something in Pakistan. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, but it just made me feel ready, and I was like, let's just take this step. And when I felt ready, I was like, I started speaking around with people. I told at that point one of my friends at work, who is luckily now my co-founder. He was
Mm-hmm.
already building something
Mm-hmm.
which is now called Curious, in a completely different format, or what we were doing at that point. Still the same problem, but we were solving it differently at that point. And it was more of a passion project at that point. It was not even envisioned to be a startup.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, hey, jump on board. Let's start building. Pakistan can be one of the focus markets. Pakistan will be the place where we will hire people and essentially create an impact. I can spend more time in Pakistan. And that is how I joined on board. And I think that's been the history since I've started at Curious.
That's amazing, and I think I get this sense of gratitude from you. That I'm a big fan of this saying, right? The gratitude brings you places, right? And you mentioned something that you don't want to come across or sound like someone who's not content, right? It's quite the contrary, right? You're curious, literally curious, right? And um, just the other day, I was having a conversation. Actually, I heard it in another podcast we were listening to. Is that, would you want to be right or would you want to be curious, right? So if you just are at one position, or you have explored it to your capacity at that given moment in time, and you want to actually keep moving forward, that's amazing, right? Steve Jobs used to, like in his very famous Stanford speech, I'm not sure if you have ever came across that, but at the end of it, he says, that I think it's Earth Catalog, if my memory serves me right. At the end of that catalog, which inspired him, basically, it said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." Right.
Yeah,
So this is hunger. What I actually get from your story, So you're curious, you're hungry, and you have a sense of gratitude, So that guilt, what you just referring to, what my brain is just telling me is that it's just sense of responsibility, sense of gratitude that, out of 7.5 billion people, me having to get this, opportunity. And secondly, I often personally do be saying this: people like us get lost in the statistics, right? We are 24 million, only in the city of Karachi. And when you go out there, you see, wow, this could be just easily us, right? But
yeah,
somehow universe decided to be kind to us, to have given us that exposure, that given
exactly.
us that environment, which allowed us to nurture in a way that we have nurtured. So the most human thing or a decent thing one can actually have is to think of the people who actually weren't as lucky. And what is the purpose in the end of the day, right? The purpose can have different definitions or views and ways, but it's got to be bigger than yourself.
Yep.
That's how simple it is, right? So the most amount of fulfillment that comes from is thinking more than yourself, right? But you mentioned something so beautiful. So you went out there somehow, throughout the journey, the decisions, the support, and everything else you got, but you were present whenever universe was presenting an opportunity. You were ready. You were like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to take it on, and you just went ahead with it. And through that process, you got to get your cup filled.
Yep.
And an empty cup can never fill up the other cup, right? So Dalai Lama, once I was listening to this book where this reference comes from. So how can an empty cup fill another empty cup? So you got to have your cup filled. So somehow throughout the journey, universe was kind to you, just filled it up, and then now you're on a mission.
Yeah, but I had to maneuver, right? I mean, there was the other option, and I don't know how that would have lasted. I can't be sure that could have been a better journey or a worse journey, but the journey of quitting and restarting, and there's always an option to do that,
100%.
and there's nothing wrong. People do that. People are super successful, or they fail, but regardless, they kudos to them for taking that step. But I don't know. I never decided to quit. I just decided to maneuver and keep maneuvering until I found what I wanted. So yeah, I guess these are two different ways to get your destination.
100%.
It's,
100%.
it really depends on what works for you.
And I think there is a shift in how people globally think of their careers or their lives, at large now, right? So at the age of 20, you could be wanting to do something, and then when you're 25, you could be wanting to do something, and then 30 and 35 and so on and so forth. And the reason for this is because of the opportunities that are out there, right? Technology has made it all happen for us to be able to, do whatever we want to do. Learning has become a lot easier, a lot accessible. Anybody with a smartphone can literally gain a lot of knowledge if they wanted to. They can literally master any skill to do with technology. So that shift, is now seen. But some of us, even in my journey, I would have tried different things and constantly exploring and exploring and exploring. And I think it's a blessing because it's something that you fundamentally want to have in every child possible through the education system. So the question bit with your brother we were talking about, that he initiated, or he basically got you to think critically, right? Why is it important? Because everything determines on the basis of the quality thoughts that one can intrinsically produce.
Absolutely.
And if you have those creative thoughts, right? Ultimately, if you have those thoughts and if it's keep playing in your head, at one stage, whether you are an extrovert or an introvert, at some stage you're gonna speak out loud. And if the quality thought is translated now into something which is basically quality words, by keep repeating those words, eventually you're gonna take an action.
Yeah.
And that action is
Absolutely.
going to be quality. And once us humans understand quality, once it's seen, right? So the mind is illuminated now. So you no longer are in the darkness, right? So you're like, oh, I like that, because humans are hardwired to understand what is good for them. And once you understand that, okay, this is quality, you want to keep on doing it. Good thing, we want to keep on doing it. We get addicted. That's why everything goes viral. This is a very nature of us human beings, whether you want to call it cheap or whether you want to call it, that we just like good things. And ultimately what happens is that repeating something again and again, which is quality, is going to give you your habits, right? So you're going to have quality habits.
Exactly.
And ultimately what's going to happen, those habits are going to be your identity, right? Because now people are going to know you as reliable, someone who doesn't give up, who is determined, right? And this is part of our healthy ego. We would do anything to defend our identity, right? So if somehow you are producing at mass levels people with quality thoughts, that anything is possible, right? Sky is the limit, right? You can do anything you want to do, right? And that's what we were talking about before the podcast, right? It'll have a fundamental, like impact. And we didn't go into the details of your story, but now listening to your story, now I know what you were getting at. So I would love to hear your thoughts as to how do you see that in the entrepreneurial, system, and especially to do with Pakistan's ecosystem. You mentioned that you're working on the job market, or making it more accessible, or making that impact. So yeah, what are your thoughts around that?
Thoughts a little vague as a question. I'll try to justify this,
Please.
but entrepreneurship is itself a vague topic altogether, right? Like before the podcast, we were talking about how there's been a lot of work that has been done to motivate people to come into entrepreneurship, and I think that is done to a quite extent. I mean, it's an important work. It was a very, very important start, but a lot of people have done it, and we've seen a great crop of entrepreneurs that have come in, or at least people who are thinking entrepreneurially. Entrepreneurship doesn't really mean start a business, right? I mean, you can be entrepreneurial in the role that you are in as well, and you could be building something new and something, taking a problem and essentially solving it all together, and that is what entrepreneurship is about. But I feel like, and that's a personal thought, that what people are lacking right now is true mentorship on how to essentially solve that problem. So, for example, I'm motivated. I'm fully motivated that hey, I want to build something now. But at that point, like I said in my journey as well, that I was motivated to build something. I felt ready, but how? What? I don't know. I wasn't taught that part. I mean, even in the business schools, especially the school that I went to as well, and the first course that you go through is about entrepreneurship. What they tell you is that it's book entrepreneurship, right? Look at the problems around you, how you're going to go and solve for them, but they don't go all the way in terms of helping you all together. I mean, there could be other schools out there that are doing that, but think about other people who haven't gone through a business school. How do they start thinking along these lines? I mean, something so simple that people say, and this is something that takes the most time in terms of understanding, is if you're trying to solve a problem as an entrepreneur, you should be the first customer yourself. So are you the customer of the problem that you are trying to solve for? If not, then you don't know the customer. Then you need to spend a lot of time becoming the customer first, or knowing the customers, and then you build something. So you need to see the problem around you. You need to feel the pain, and you need to figure out how that can be solved. And unless you do that, you're not going to be able to solve that problem. So it's about understanding the problem deeply, which unfortunately hasn't been happening at scale around us. Yes, there are entrepreneurs who are helping other people, and that is helping. Some people have access to entrepreneurs across borders, which is helpful. But when you talk about any random person who does not have these resources or people around them, for them, the golden standard is all the success stories that we have seen in other podcasts as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And when you talk about only success stories, it's like it's like Instagram, right? Instagram homepage. You just scroll down and you go like, everyone's life is just perfect.
Yes.
Turns out it's not.
Yes.
It's everyone has its own ups and downs, and this is the best of the best moments that they're sharing. And that is what, unfortunately, or fortunately, I mean, it's a gray line between. But entrepreneurs are doing the same thing as well. They're only sharing the success stories. Why are we not having a conversation around the biggest failures we've had?
100%.
We are not proud of sharing that.
Yes.
Fine, we are not proud of sharing that over a podcast. Let's do that in a room. Let's do that one-on-one.
Yes.
Let's admit first that we have gone through something which has shaped us differently. Because if I only tell you all my successes, and if I don't tell you all my failures,
yes, expectations, you're setting wrong expectations, or not
you
clear
will be like, hey, when you face that problem, you're going to be like, hey, Usama didn't face this problem. Usama was successful. Successful is more of a perspective, but But let's assume someone looks at him.
Accepted definition of
Yeah,
successful. Yeah.
but then you go like, you don't know who he is. You don't know what he's gone through. And there are a lot more successful people around us. And the biggest example, at least all of us would have heard, is if he can do it, why can't you? You can't because you haven't faced the problems that person has.
Journey.
But what it also means is you have faced your own set of problems. You can become your own individual self. You don't have to become a second of anyone.
Powerful.
You have to be a mixture of someone, which is yourself and your own problems and your own failures, and that's who you're going to become.
And I think this is very good because we are talking about the same thing when we were saying that earlier on. You mentioned something so beautiful, right? Is that the only difference that you see that people don't even think it's possible.
Exactly.
It's specifically to do with Pakistan. You were saying, right, that
Yeah.
people can't even fathom that that's even a possibility. And the difference that you were sharing, that in the West, people are like, oh, anything is possible.
Yeah.
If you can't imagine, they say everything happens twice, first in your imagination and then in reality, right? So the imagination is not getting there. That means, if you think you can, if you think you can't, either ways, you're right?
Yep.
So it's so powerful, right? You said something which I believe personally is at the very core, at the very, very foundation of doing something great, is to know our own worth. If you were to look at your own self as a phenomena that has never happened before in the universe, and it'll never happen again, and you are unique, so how can you be a second version or a replica? Yes, you can take inspiration from people. I have a mental board, if I were to say, right? So whenever I'm struggling with certain challenges, I have certain people I have studied, which I have taken certain chunks out of their journeys or their challenges or their lifestyle where there was a relatability on my journey. And I have this imaginary board. And I always, when I'm doing critical thinking, when I'm meditating, I'm thinking in my head what he would have done or what she would have done. Right. And I go through those perspectives. But in the end of the day, its final is mine because I am unique. So I need to learn from all people that are available that have done something meaningful. And then in the end, and you do it. But the very core of it, which keeps me to dream big or to just think that, that we can literally put the dent in the universe, is by knowing that we are a phenomena which never happened before and it's never going to happen. So
Exactly.
So that's something.
All you can do is try, right? And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Life's short. That's completely fine. But at least you tried. If you didn't try, then there's always going to be regret that you didn't try. So that's all you can work towards.
Yes, and Samir from Social Champ, he said something so beautiful that if at the end of your life, if the flashbacks was to be converted into a movie or a short film, would you enjoy it or would you be proud of watching that movie that was your life, right? And that's a very one way of looking at it, that doing something so meaningful that once you are, transitioning from this world or, once your life comes to an end, did you do something which was meaningful? Did you do, something which was, and did you care? Or were you afraid of failure, or what other people will think? These things really make a difference. You see, fundamentally, failure is looked at opposite of success, right? But in reality, failure is a part of success.
Exactly. And it's a perspective.
And
I mean, every single time you failed, you gained something. So that is also success.
100%.
So I mean, it's a perspective. You can see the glass half full or half empty. Yes, you're going to be unhappy, but during that process, you learned a lot. So I mean, if you're wise enough, you won't make the same mistakes again.
And how do you get to that stage? And I would love to hear your thought leadership on this. How do you get to this stage? I'm repeating this, right? You have this really calm, really grateful energy that I'm actually, feeling, right? How do you get to that stage? What is it that you do, practically? Is there anything that you could, share with people who have aspirations and have, I'm going to repeat that, guilt or the hunger, we would say, to really make an impact? What would be the practical advice? How do your thought process about that?
I think it works differently for everyone. I can just share what worked for me.
Please.
I remember the times when I was very, very anxious. I wasn't happy. Like I wasn't content. I wasn't calm. I remember the times, and at that time, I tried multiple things. Right, I tried different ways of coming out of it, and one thing that worked beautifully for me is being closer to the creator as much as possible. And I'm not going to say that I'm the most practicing person, but the closer I went, the more calmer I felt. So I mean, regardless of whatever religion you follow, you don't follow, that's completely fine. But but what matters the most is that you're taking out time in a day to meditate, and just just focus out and see what's happening, and see where you are today, and count your blessings. And when you do that, you go like, man, I'm super lucky. You'll always find, and being in the country where we are, we can find a lot of examples of all the blessings that we have. And when we count those, we the only thing you can essentially get out of this is humility, and you can be like, man, I'm living one of the best lives out there. And when you know that fact, all and one other thing that worked for me was also having as less expectations as possible from people around me. So if you don't expect anything, then whatever they do is a bonus for you.
That's one big challenge I have,
And the um, second thing is what we just talked about, which is being closer to the creator, and counting your blessings. I think these things do calm me down, and you just pointed on the problem that about expectations, the problem that you've had. One thing I tell my team as well is we by by you working with us, we are not हम आप पे कोई एहसान नहीं कर रहे, आप हम पे कोई एहसान नहीं कर रहे, right?
Yeah.
You have a service to offer. We are paying you for it, right?
Yeah.
At a comparative salary. That's all. Now, the only thing that we can do above and beyond is just be good to each other. And that is all. So if I'm saying, looking at my colleague, and I'm going to be like, hey, this person is not going above and beyond. Am I paying him for above and beyond? Did I require that from him? Did I ask him for it? No. So why should I have that expectation from them? If someone is going above and beyond, then you are liable to go above and beyond for them as well. Let it be in terms of compensation, let it be in terms of mentorship, let it be in terms of opportunities, let it be in terms of whatever ways of.
Very practical. I love it. Yes.
So you just have to look at what you are offering to others as well, rather than always thinking, why is that person not doing anything for me?
I think this is so powerful. You see, my problem, right, is again, it drives from the complexity of wanting to do what you want to do, right? And with personally speaking, what really bothers me is I see the potential in an individual, and I'm like, dude, you are smarter than I would ever be, right? And you have so much going for you. Why aren't you striving to reach your maximum potential, right? And somehow, for me, it gets really, really, like intense. And I'm like, it's not for myself. It's not that I'm looking to just get something, for myself. Of course, team at large is going to benefit, but why aren't you striving for greatness, right? Why aren't you, Jim Collins, Good to Great, the book, at the beginning of the book is good is the biggest enemy of great, right? So when you talk about it, how can you not sort of, around you want to be, because you're the byproduct of your environment, right? And I'm talking about from my personal perspective. I'm like, why aren't we demanding more from one another? And how can we just take away that tape that, what usually happens between the employee and employer relation, right? And how can we build a culture where everybody is just behind a mission and they're, like pushing it? So, of course, that practicality element, that fairness has to be there, right?
Yeah.
That you give the clear instructions, you give them the fair compensation, you look after them and everything else. And in return, they should do the same. But how would you go about, like, making sure that everybody's seeing the North Star and they know that the task that we are on is literally, by definition, is putting the dent in the universe. And by doing something, mediocre or normal, what everybody else is doing is not going to get us there, right? So how would you go about that? Or what are your thoughts around that?
I fundamentally feel that you don't have to do that. And I'll tell you why. You have a certain goal, that, hey, you want to achieve something, right? That is your goal. That is not someone else's goal. You have to make sure that the other people feel that that should be their goal as well. So either you have to motivate them, so you have to do your job better in terms of motivating them and creating, aligning your goal with theirs and making sure that the goals are aligned so that they're excelling and they're achieving. Because they're not going to do it for you. They're going to do it for themselves, because everyone at the end of the day is serving themselves, not someone else. So they are going to serve something that motivates them. So at the end of it, I mean, and people will make mistakes. So for example, if we are saying that you and I are a byproduct of mistakes, then that person should get an equal opportunity to make his or her own mistakes.
Beautiful.
Unfortunately, that comes in your project. It happens in your project.
And you can't
and
afford.
and that is how it's going to be. But the beauty of your own project is also going to be that it's going to be a product of the mistakes that it has gone through.
Yes.
So it will again become, like in your words, a unique phenomena altogether. Why can there cannot be a second company doing exactly the same? Two competitors started at the same time doing exactly the same thing, cannot be the same company, because they went through different people, different mistakes, different colleagues altogether. So that's how it's going to be. So you have to embrace that people will learn the most when they experience the failure. That is experiential learning. And when they do that, unfortunately, as an entrepreneur, you don't have to, you will not only face your own failures, you will have to face the failures of your colleagues as well.
Endure the
and,
cost.
And that's completely fine. I mean, this is where you did the cost benefit analysis in the first place to become an entrepreneur.
That is so powerful. I think this is so beautiful, right? Because I love that, because this is leadership and servant leadership we are talking about here, right? And people don't really work for you, if you think that, because I wanted that to get this clarity when you said that it's a fair compensation. I didn't want anybody to not understand the full, like the conversation that you were trying to create. That just money, of course you're giving them the comparative salary, but that's not the end of it, right? You just need to somehow understand that you work for the people because you are selling your dream to them.
Exactly. And that is your job as an entrepreneur.
That is your job, to just get them to see the same North Star. And if you have to somehow drag sometimes, yes, you can be smart about it. You can use different tactics to keep them going. But in the end of the day, the ownership resides with you, right? And that's the challenge.
At the end of the day, you don't want people to say that I built this because Amin wanted this.
Yes.
I built this because I wanted this. I believe in this. I feel like people will get value out of this, and this is why I created this. And these are the most powerful companies out there that have we in it, and not I or this one person altogether.
That is so powerful. And as we coming up to the end of this beautiful conversation, we could go on for the whole day.
For sure.
Entrepreneurship and the advice for people who want to go on that, like, it's beautiful, it's rewarding, it's satisfying, it actually keeps you on that hunch. No day is the same day, in any given week or a month. What piece of advice you would have for the aspiring entrepreneurs operating in Pakistan's landscape, and then the people who are backing them, or the people who are the catalyst in this industry? What are your thoughts that's needed to be doubling down on, and what are the things that you think needs improvement, and there has to be a practical plan to fix it?
Yeah, only personal thoughts here, not gonna reflect on anyone else's. So, but I'm gonna try and draw parallels. I love drawing parallels. I love making things simpler, and I love trying to see things from a different perspective as well. So let's pick a religion as an example. If I tell you that for you, regardless of whatever religion you're following, for you to be practicing your religion, you have to be the priest. What would you say?
Fucking hell. Excuse my French. Yeah.
Right? But if I tell you, you can start practicing your religion on your own. Once
At
you're
your pace.
content,
Yeah.
you can start following with other people around you. And then when you're content, then you go even larger and larger to a point where you're content, right? No pushing. And all the people around you have to do is to help you, give you space to practice it and just do that, right? And that makes you content. Entrepreneurship is a practice. Thrived within. If you're content, go out and do it with a couple of people around you, with your colleagues. If you're content, go do it with a larger organization. If you're content, build your own company. If you're content, go become a leader somewhere else. That's all. You don't have to quit what you're doing and become a priest, or and in literal forms the entrepreneur that we call today,
Yeah. Found
to
out.
go
Yeah.
do, or become a founder to do that. You can do that where you are today. Start practicing today. If this is what makes you happy, you're going to start doing it around you without even noticing that you're doing it. And the people around you, all they have to do is make sure that they are helping you in creating an inclusive environment, or not telling you that, hey, you're not a priest. Hey, you're not a fully practicing entrepreneur. They don't have to do that. They just have to commend you on what you're doing, and you'll make it.
Powerful.
You'll just be yourself.
Powerful. And to do with the Pakistan's ecosystem, considering the challenges in the state, where of course globally there is a crunch, when it comes to the venture funding and the support element, and it's doubly challenging for the entrepreneurs in Pakistan. What practical advice would you have for the people in Pakistan? But I loved your paddling. I think it's phenomenal. I've never heard of it, and this is just beautiful.
Thank you. In terms of Pakistan context, right? It's tough. It's tough. I mean, if it's tough enough, you would have left already, right? If you had the opportunity. A lot of people don't. Now, unfortunately, you're left with the cards that you are with, right? Now, what will you do? You can choose to do a job for the rest of your life, and that's completely fine as well. Nothing wrong in doing that. But you could potentially take a step to become an entrepreneur, but know your own worth, like what we started with, right? You are a product of the society, so you know the society better than anyone across the world. Now, these over 200 million people in the country are not gonna one day just vanish from this country and go to some other countries, right? So where the problems are the biggest, where the gaps are the biggest, and this is where the opportunities are the biggest as well. So this is what we've heard hundreds of times already, right? From all the aspiring entrepreneurs. But at the end of it, know why you are the best person to do it is because you've gone through that unique problem that only you can solve, or people around you can solve. Luckily, you are in a country that no one in the world can solve your problem. If you are in a first world country, anyone can come in. Anyone can start building a company. It's easier to open an entity. It's easier to open a bank account. It's easier to start doing business. Everything is available on Google. The data is there. So it's a fair competition. You have an unfair advantage today. The unfair advantage is that no one in the world, so it's not 7.5 billion people that can solve this problem. It's only this 200 million people that can solve this problem.
Wow.
And you, being the phenomena that you are, in your words, are the chosen one who can solve for that problem. So the competition is rather lesser than more. It's just the board has changed. The game has different rules, and you can play with them. I mean, success or failure is only going to be a byproduct of the opportunity and the luckiness and the success and the work that you put. That's completely fine. But thinking that you can't is not an option, because this is an opportunity in itself.
That is so powerful. I think you just reminded me of, have a healthy relationship with failure. And I think the other day when we were in NED, you mentioned something which has stuck with me as well, that if you can, it's not that it's a hard and fast rule, but if you have never lived a rich life and you try and solve the rich people's problem, right? You don't really have these little intricacies, right?
Absolutely.
You don't have those internal details. Like, if the problem is 50 levels down and you just have the understanding of 1, 2, 3 levels, right?
You have no idea to who you're
You
solving
don't
for.
know what you're solving for. And this is where the going is going to get tough. It's inevitable.
Absolutely.
It's a cyclical nature, right? So when you are an entrepreneur, you know that there are no highs all the time. You may be on the feature for a day or two because you raise funding, or you just was invited as a guest speaker or whatever. That is just 1 or 2 days. Rest of the time, there is like the flow, and then there are times which are dark, which are difficult.
And investors are smart, right? Investors understand that. I mean, there are investors globally who have invested in other countries in very, very successful companies. So don't they realize that, hey, what has worked in India or Indonesia, in Vietnam, is going to work in Pakistan as well, in somewhat a different form. They do understand that.
Yes.
So they have a playbook of how that was solved.
Yes.
They have the money. Why don't they come in and solve the problem in Pakistan? The simple answer is they can't. They haven't lived the problem.
Yes.
And if they haven't lived the problem, they cannot solve for it.
Yes.
So you are the one who's going to solve it.
Yes.
These guys are going to be the enablers.
Yes.
You just have to take the first step.
100%. And I think sustainability has to be at the core of it. Not just chasing the glam or, these highlights we talk about.
I mean, even if you come in for that, the journey is going to humble you down really, really quickly. So I mean, I'm not too worried about that.
I see what you mean.
It's not a story where you're gonna. It's not a life that you're gonna be able to last long enough if you come only for that.
Yes, and I think this is so powerful because somehow some people, if you can speak, or if you can just create a narrative and a story and a problem which is something that you're passionate about, because you need to be in love with the problem, not with the solution, right? So you're dead right. Eventually one or the other cycle of these waves are gonna knock you out of the park, right?
Absolutely.
And it's gonna just come at the surface.
That will be a learning itself as well.
And then it'll be amazing, and then you'll get back up again if your core and if your foundations are right. And it's just so small little things that makes a world of a difference. It's about the mindset. People think that all the technicalities in the world is gonna solve it. So coming towards the end, the last question I have, looking back, what one thing you think that you could have done differently and you would have had a bigger impact than what you have right now?
Nothing.
So you're just...
I mean, I am who I am because of the failures and the successes that that I've had in the past. If I change any one thing about that, I don't know if that's going to lead to a success or a failure. Because if I say that, hey, this was the biggest mistake I made, if I did not make it, I would be more successful. But am I sure about that? Because that failure actually got me success afterwards as well, because I learned something out of it.
Got you to the stage where you are.
So I mean, I'm super content with where I am. I mean, success or failure, whatever I've had in the past, whatever you call it, for me, all of those are successes. And that's fine. I mean, I am who I am, and I'm lucky to be who I am.
That is so powerful. You never lose, you only learn.
Yeah.
As a closing statement.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being phenomenal. You were great. Thank you so much.